So, about what, a month ago now, I made a video talking about how we on the left, we need to look at, areas where we don't tend to talk about a lot. I'd still talk this about business. How do we as the left approach sort of the business community? How can we make sure that, they are, um, they are sort of catered for? Because that's a lot of sort of votes just left on the floor. We've talked about foreign policy before. Defense is certainly another area where the left is sort of weak on. Um, but and one in particular, and this is really showing, is agriculture, because agriculture in particularly rural communities is definitely, I would say, a massive, massive blind spot for um, for left wing and of course campaigners when they go out to sort of look at this. How does sort of the left appeal to sort of rural communities and farmers in general? What's the offering that the left tends to have for these rural areas and rural communities? And unfortunately, the answer has been not a lot. And if you want to show how bad that ends up becoming, just look at what's going on in Europe and even now starting to happen in the UK. We've got all those farmer protests happening. And why are they protesting? Well, they are being whipped up, not by the left or the centrists or sort of the traditional sort of conservatives in their countries. They're being whipped up by the far right because they have been focusing on these guys, saying, oh, look at these guys, these true traditionalists, these true way of values that these people, show, and sort of lauding them and telling them how great they are, and that these things that the EU wants to bring in is like going to destroy their way of life, when it's not at all. um, you know, it is very, very dangerous that you allow these groups to just let slip away into the arms of someone else. And we saw this during the Brexit referendum, where the fishermen, I don't know how many videos I've made since 2016 saying this time and time again, that the second that Farage was done with you, he would have nothing to do with fishermen. And I've been proved right on that. He has thrown the fishermen away because they were a useful tool at the time. Doesn't need them anymore now. He's done with them. Doesn't really care what happens to the fisherman. He never did. He was never the fisherman's friend, as he was sort of once portrayed to be. But why did the fishermen go to him? Why did they see him as a champion? Because he was the only guy who was going to them, who was talking with them, and then spouting off, the number one thing that the fishermen, quote, truly wanted, which was to be out of the European Common Fisheries Policy. So he was the only one there, and if he's the only one there, who do you think these people go to listen to? And this is why the left should pay attention to all kinds of different groups continuously, and not take any of these people for granted or anything like that. Because if you stop talking with these groups, you stop engaging with them, then where else are they going to go? And this is where you get someone like George Galloway now popping up, trying to sort of play both sides. And you saw that in the Rochdale by-election with his two leaflets, one for the Muslim areas and one for the non-Muslim areas, talking about, how immigration is bad and he wants to make Rochdale great again, while the other one in the Muslim areas predominantly focused on the issue of Palestine. You have to wonder, why did he not send, one of those to both communities? Just, something that should be thought about. But there is now a growing opportunity. And this growing opportunity for the left now becomes the fact of the UK farmers their frustration is now growing because Brexit is having a massive impact on their business, the trade deals, the fact that they have completely failed to replicate or even make better the original agricultural subsidies that they're receiving from the EU. The ELMs are worthless. Most farmers can't even use them or go for them or don't even want to use them. It's been very, very bad for them. In particular, you saw recently the farmer protest where Rishi Sunak turned up in Wales because it was against the quote Labour administration. So of course he comes down to try and sort of take some advantage of that. And we talked about their hypocrisy about supporting those types of farm protests when, if that had been a climate protest, oh, the police would have been there momentarily. But yeah. But the opportunity now does represent to the left the ability to sort of go and grab those votes, to reach out to a community where we haven't had a traditional lead to these farmers and to these people. So, and this came up on here, which I think again is very worth going over. But before we do that, please do remember to click on the like, the share, and the subscribe button. The down below is the Patreon page, the Buy Me Coffee link, where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course the Pony Club as well. So I'm just going to go over this because I think this is once again the point of these voting shift that is now happening in farmers and is in traditional Tory areas. Where are these Tory areas? Some of them are going to be Labour Conservative, but I'd say a lot of them really in these areas could go to Lib Dems because there's a lot of conservative Lib Dem contests which are going to be very important to getting the Conservatives out of the next general election. So this comes from the BPN. The UK farmers' frustration grows, Brexit's impact and future voting shifts. So UK farmers are voicing their discontent with the current Conservative government handling of the post-Brexit trade deals and agricultural policies, signalling now a potential shift in their traditional voting patterns. As the trade agreements with Australia and New Zealand expose local farmers to fierce competition, the dissatisfaction is now further fueled by inadequate government support and the controversial Sustainable Farming Initiative scheme. This discontent amongst the farming community is now being highlighted at the recent National Farmers Conference, which now raises concerns of the future political landscape in rural Britain. And remember, this was once, and most of these areas are traditional Tory heartlands. They've lost the farmers. They've even lost the land managers. And it is well worth pointing this out and thinking, right, what can we do? What can we offer these rural areas? How can we go about helping make them happy and sort of productive? What policies can we do to get their votes? So the long-standing support of the Conservative Party among the UK's farming communities is now under threat due to the perceived neglect and unfavourable policies. Colin Rayner, a seasoned Berkshire farmer with deep-rooted ties to conservatism, embodies this growing disillusionment. Rayner criticises the government shift towards environmental schemes that prioritise wildflower planting over food production, alongside the detrimental financial implications of recent trade deals. And such sentiments are now echoed across rural Britain, with many fearing the viability of their livelihoods under the current policies. And that is where the ability to do this comes in. What are we going to do? And I know there is a Farmers for Labour group. I would love to speak to their leader at some point, because I would love to know what is Labour going to do? How are we going to sort of look at agricultural policy? What are we going to sort of look at, and to ensure that we can get these people on board and voting for Labour and have good policy as well. But you can already see the concerns. It is food production. So how can we ensure good food production for these farmers while also ensuring that we also have that environmental protection as well? I think there needs to be a very clear balance struck here. And it's, how do you do it? Where do you do this? Again, I'm not an expert in this agricultural field, so I can't really say what that perfect balance is going to be, but that seems to be what we have to try and look for. So the trade agreements with Australia and New Zealand will now become effective from May of 2023, have now sparked a particular concern. By removing tariffs on agricultural imports, these deals place UK farmers at a competitive disadvantage due to higher production costs. The resultant economic strain and is exacerbating the challenges now faced by farmers with such rising input costs and market pressures from supermarkets. These factors continue to contribute to a sense of abandonment by a government that once promised steadfast support to the agricultural sector. And that's another area where we need to focus. How can we make sure that farmers do get a good price from supermarkets? That's the big one. Another big thing that needs to be sorted. But again, I'm not sure how you would go about doing that. But we'd have to see. So this growing discontent amongst the farmers and rural communities is expected to have a significantly political implications. The polling data suggests a dramatic shift away from the Conservative Party in upcoming elections, with potential gains for the Labour, the Liberal Democrats, and other parties. Victoria Vevan, the president of the Country Land and Business Association, and other stakeholders highlighted the need for all political parties to better engage and understand the concerns of rural Britain. The farming community's call for more supportive, more inclusive policies underscores the urgency of addressing their issues to prevent further discontent between the rural areas and Westminster. So that is the real area of concern of what could happen, because at the moment you are seeing the far right in Europe massively take advantage of these farmer protests. They have been responsible for fomenting these protests, and they are trying to use them as like a key core election issue for many of the elections that are happening this year in Europe. So that is something that we should be aware of and be prepared to fight back against, because otherwise, well, you end up with farmers supporting the far right. And bear in mind, if shown where Farage is, well, no, I'm done with you, fishermen, don't need you anymore. Bye. Remember, the Polish far right, the Peace and Justice Party, did this as well. And the beginning of their their rise, they heavily associated with farmers and rural communities. Once they got in power, they realized, well, they didn't need these farmers and areas more. They abandoned them. And then when they got really into trouble in the last election where they lost to Donald Tusk, they went back to these farmers and fomented up new problems for them to try and take. So for like, you've got farmers saying, oh, we don't want Ukrainian grain in Poland. Well, most of this grain isn't staying in Poland. It's going through Poland because it needs to get to other ports, because they can't use their port for, well, obvious reasons. But they have been fueled by this far right fear campaign that they're going to buy Ukrainian grain instead of Polish grain. And that is the far right, once again, fomenting, trying to sort of get that wedge issue and trying to sort of use them again. Like I say, they did it with fishermen. Look how Farage treats fishermen now. Not very well. You ain't seen him anywhere near any big fishing conferences or anything like that since 2016. He has pretty much abandoned them full scale on this. And it would be the same for the farmers. If they helped someone else get elected, eventually, as we saw in Poland, they'd be abandoned because it's not really a core vote. Yes, it's good something to talk about, but eventually when you get into power, you actually have to, deal with their concerns. And of course, they didn't deal with their concerns, which ultimately led them to abandoning that demographic and then having to try and go back to that demographic when they were in trouble. So once again, something that we need to sort of think about and be on top of, and be thinking about how we can reach out to those communities. So as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.